Hello, 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 and welcome to this week's Everyday Inclusion and Belonging, where we talk about everything under the sun when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we have a really timely topic today. We are going to be talking about the impact of the presidential election and politics overall on inclusion and what we can be doing to prepare, because 2016 actually gave us a blueprint for some of the things that we can expect. So let's be proactive this time in terms of preparing for the impact on inclusion. And last night's debate, where some very divisive, incendiary comments were made, are a great example of what we need to be doing to be proactive. So I'm joined by Texanna Reeves, and I'm really excited to have Texanna with us. She has such deep experience and so much to offer in DEI. So Texanna, I would love for you to introduce yourself because I won't do it justice.
Well, thank you so much, Mo. And again, my name is Texanna Reeves. I'm a global diversity and inclusion subject matter expert, 20 years in extensive experience in diversity and inclusion in large multinational organizations, different industries, different diversity and inclusion maturity levels, whether organizations are in their infancy stage, just beginning, or whether the company is mature and wanting DEI management to be more aligned with their business to achieve better outcomes. I partner with these organizations to develop strategies and programs to attract, develop, engage, and retain the world's best talent to fulfill their organizational mission.
Well, and what I love, Texanna, is I feel like every conversation you and I have, I always leave with an aha and an idea. So I'll say this up front, y'all. If you're not connected with Texanna on LinkedIn, other places, I always watch for your posts, the information that you're sharing. It's always so relevant. And that's why I really wanted you to join me on this really weighty, big topic about politics and the impact right now on inclusion. I will say this, leaders, today, check in with your teams, check in with any BIPOC person on your team, check in, because last night's debate has a lot of people feeling scared, feeling marginalized. So it doesn't matter, again, what we're going to talk about is it doesn't matter what your politics are. What matters is, as a leader, what you are doing to make the folks on your team understand that they are valued, seen, and belong on your teams. And Texanna, I would love for you to, I know that you've got some data around what happened after 2016, right? This blueprint for what we can expect. And actually, what, again, last night's debate, good example of what we're already experiencing.
Yeah, very good. And so the impact of the external environment to the workplace has become more, I would say, polarizing. And to have a better idea of what that is when we look back at the 2016 in comparison to now, is certainly we can expect even more of unrest based on what's been happening lately around racial unrest. And the conversations, as you know, previously has been more taboo, but certainly it's much more common now in the workplace. And just to give a little flavor around some of the data that we learned from the 2016 presidential election on the impact of the workplace, what it's indicated is that we really need to be much more intentional and plan. The American Psychological Association, a survey that they conducted, stated that half of the post-election respondents, in fact, 54%, said they had discussed politics at work since the election. And for 40% of American workers, it has caused at least one negative outcome, such as reduced productivity, poorer work quality, difficulty getting work done, a more negative view of their coworkers that can be lasting, feeling actually stressed out as well as increased workforce hostility. This is a significant increase from the pre-election survey they had conducted again in 2016, which only represented 27% that reported at least one negative outcome.
So it was from 20, yeah, I mean, right?
Yeah, so wow. So when we think about this, decreased productivity, poor quality of work, negative impact on employee relations, negative impact on health and well-being, and increased workplace hostility. That's the business case on why we need to really have this at the forefront from an inclusion perspective, to be able to be prepared and to help our workforce.
Well, and I think, and that was 2016 data.
Yeah.
Now think about the world we're in right now. Layer COVID on top of this,
Yes.
right? Where we already have, people are from COVID, particularly if you've got caregivers, whether that's children or adult. I mean, people are already maxed out and stressed out, and then we're adding this. So yeah, if you're looking for a business case, like you literally as a leader cannot ignore this, and you have to be proactive. So Texanna, I'd love to hear some things from you. What are some things that leaders can be doing?
Yeah, so, and what leaders can be doing, and let me just also back up for just a second, because I did talk about 2016 and I wanted to build off of what you stated in terms of what happened last night and what's happening with this particular election. As we know, in terms of things have been polarizing throughout these last 4 years. And what actually is an indicator of last night in reference to what we could anticipate with the election, and particularly post the election, is the fact that we can expect that, first of all, President Trump clearly indicated if he does not win the election, that it's rigged and an unfair election, and that he cannot agree to a peaceful transition of power if he loses. He would also not denounce, as you mentioned earlier, white supremacy and involved white nationalists, the Proud Boys, to stand back and stand out. Well, I don't even know what that means, but what I'm sure it doesn't mean is unity. I don't think it means unity.
Well, and let's not lose fact of the sight that he was using the racist language of Chinese flu, right? So
Absolutely.
Not forget that as well. So it was
with COVID.
We can expect chaos after the election, right? Whatever the results are, we can expect some chaos.
We can expect some chaos. And there was also something recently that happened that is potentially can have a profound impact on us as DEI professionals. He defended the recent decision to stop all anti-racism training for federal agencies and his new executive order on combating race and sex stereotyping to all federal contractors that conduct business with the US government, to cease workplace diversity training that teaches concepts that he perceives to be decisive concepts, such as anti-racism or unconscious bias training. Obviously, these trainings were designed not to be decisive, but actually designed in order to be more inclusive, to create this more welcoming environment. Well, those are all at stake right now.
Yeah.
Actually, elimination.
It's interesting, Texanna, because again, and I know the conversations, this work is about bringing people together.
Yes.
And so to say that all of that should stop is, not just alarm bells, but like setting up the fireworks of like, we have a problem here.
So what do we do, right?
So what do we do? And it's interesting because obviously doing this work, I get outreach from lots of folks, and this morning in particular, and I said, do the next right thing. Right? Do the next right, like, because I think one of the things that we can be doing as leaders right now and facing all this is to get paralyzed.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing. So if it's feeling too big, do the next right thing.
Very good. Excellent. I love that, Mo.
Right. Yeah. So if you can focus on that, then go ahead. And I was just going to say that all credit to Nikki Rogers. When Nikki was on this, she shared that with me. And it is the thing I've been sharing out consistently since she and I had a conversation about white allyship around do that next right thing, because then you can stay in action. So I know, Texanna, because you've 20 plus years of this work. You've seen organizations and leaders through some things, right? Yes. So what's your advice? What should we be doing right now?
So some of the things that you can be able to do is first support voting. And so know your current policies. In fact, SHRM has an excellent article that's called On Election Day is Coming. What are your obligations as an employer? Employers should immediately review existing policies and practices to ensure compliance with applicable laws and be prepared to address employee requests for time off during Election Day, November 3rd, and even what happens afterward. So voting holidays, for examples, are encouraged in terms of to have your employees to go out and vote. Some states actually have it as a holiday, such as Virginia, while other states, such as California, are required, based on their California election codes, to be able to offer time paid off for 2 hours, for example. Some companies, such as Twitter, also just made it a company holiday in terms of Election Day.
Right.
Support volunteerism is that Starbucks, Old Navy, Target, Microsoft, just to name a few, are encouraging employees and consumers to serve as poll workers. This is where you also want to engage your ERGs to be able to have them to encourage voting and or volunteering.
I love that. I love that, to link in the ERGs. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, absolutely. And also that's leading up to the election, but in addition, and Election Day, but also prepare for post-election. As you mentioned earlier, Mo.
Well, so before we get into post-election, let's talk about preparing for. It's interesting. The impact of COVID is far-reaching in terms of this election. Many of the poll judges and poll workers are older Americans who, because of risk concerns, so sign up. I'm really happy to say Andrea Di Matteo, who's on our team, is serving as a poll judge.
Excellent.
I actually, put my application in. I haven't heard back, but I'm going to go and see. So I'm going to go and pursue that. So right now, there's a need. And what a cool way as an organization, again, across the political spectrum, what a cool way as an organization to say, we were a part of a key to our democracy. And I love if you can get an ERG doing that, what that does as well. And even conversations with leaders, right? So I love the examples that you shared, but as a leader, you could say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do to make sure that either people understand our mail-in ballot procedures? I know that, for Pennsylvania example, right, the naked ballot won't be. So even doing some cool, hey, how do you vote in our state?
Yeah, plan to vote.
Yeah.
With that planning to vote is also thinking about what meetings are you scheduling the day before and day after the election, particularly the day after election and the day of. Try not to have any major meetings, because I tell you, you are not going to have 100% focused individuals if you're going to have meetings those days.
Texanna, I have 2 stories to tell. After the 2016 election, I had an all-day meeting the day after with an organization, and everyone was exhausted. Everyone was, and somebody said something like, oh, we're not going to talk about the election. And when I got up to speak, I said, we absolutely are talking about the election. And I just said, and one woman just broke into tears and said, I can't be processing any of this. And I said, that's okay. Right. So I think it's a good example. The second was on that Thursday, right? So I flew out, was working with an executive team, and the CHRO came up to me and said, what do I do? What do I do? I've got people all over, I have people who are elated. I have people who are, and I said, talk about your core values as an organization.
Excellent. Excellent, Mo.
Right. Yeah. But don't schedule those meetings, because and you say the day after, Texanna, I would say the week after, right? That Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it better be light.
Yes.
let people be working on their own projects. I would say let that be individual work time, but don't try and do any, good God, no budget conversations, no strategic conversations. Try not to have client meetings.
Absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement with that. And I loved it when you mentioned about the values, the core values, Mo. This is the time, again, despite the affiliation, political affiliation, what you're going to have is post the election is that, as you mentioned, Mo, you're going to have people that are elated and people that are devastated, absolutely devastated. And so how can you handle this as an organization? Is that where you go is that you really land on what will be common ground. And that is on your stated values. Examples of those can be such as treating people with dignity and respect, teamwork, showing you care and you support each other and encourage each other, and working together on the greater good of the common mission of the organization.
So center back, right?
Center back to, again, what I say is stated. Those values have been there for however many years, okay? Yep. So this isn't something that you made up, okay? Something that the company has identified that is core to them. And so this is where you can meet on that common ground despite your differences.
Yes.
The thing is that, again, support time off. One company modified their sick leave policy in order to offer their employees time off as a mental health day. And so look at your sick leave policies. Look at the current resources that you have around health and well-being. How can you be able to promote those, to offer those during this? Like you said, it's not just one day, it's an extended time.
Well, and because of some of the mail-in ballot, right, they're saying that we might not know the results for.
Oh, thank you so much for raising that, because it is unlike any other election. The fact of us knowing the next day, we're not likely to know. And I'm so glad you raised that, because we really should be not looking at just a day, but to be able to look at multiple days and perhaps even multiple weeks of how are we going to get through this. And this is where it's not always trying to come up with something new, but being able to, depending on your resources, is to being able to leverage what you have and reimagining and rethinking what you have. So when I think,
you know what's interesting, Texanna, I just saw some some research, excuse me, wildfires here. The smoke is just, to be able to check in with your folks, because the data said something like 70% of people had not heard from the person that they report to on this. Just what's your capacity right now? Do you need anything? Do you need, some time off? Do you need us to look at what your deliverables are over these next couple of weeks? And at the end of
Yes,
the day, right, that's a good time to be having that check-in, because a lot of people are shook right now.
that's right.
And so and same thing post election. So
Mhm.
not, center back on the core values, but also, my goodness,
Yes.
check in with your folks.
I would say you can't check in enough. And mainly this is the time in order to set that psychological safety type of environment. And
Yes.
the fact of you don't have to know all the answers. What you can be is just a sounding board. What you can do is be able to be enabled to know what resources again that you have that you can offer employees. What you can also do is say, shut down the computer for an hour.
Step
And
away, right?
yes,
Take a break.
just take a break. Is that those are things that are simple, that are appreciated. Like you mentioned, just the acknowledgement makes a difference when people are going through a difficult time, to know, even though they can't do anything about it, to know that somebody cares, that somebody really wants, again, around their well-being.
Well, and one of the things, Texanna, that leaders may not know, and this was a great conversation that I had with Lori Berenstecker, where we were talking about how companies are stepping up with different benefits right now.
Yes.
Your organization has probably added some mental health
Mhm.
resources that you don't know about.
Mhm.
Even if it's, I know there are organizations doing things like giving people the app Calm.
Yes.
Or, so just also check in.
Air.com.
Yeah, right. Check
Your
in and
program.
find out, make sure you are up to date on all of the resources that you can offer to your employees.
Absolutely. And also think about some things that if you're in a position to be able to do some things new, is to think about that in terms of whether or not some of the employee assistance programs, et cetera, or even some of your learning and development team members have access to resilience training. And
Yes.
be able to offer that type of education during this time, especially because we know it is going to be longer lasting than dealing with just a couple weeks, et cetera. In addition, let's
Well,
go.
and it's interesting. We're adding to the Everyday Inclusion app right now. We're making sure that we have things around empathy.
Yes.
And right, and we always say, right, it's about seeing the human. To empathy, respect, kindness.
Yes, being kind. Oh my goodness, absolutely. And then it's also a time to do some things that might be inspirational.
Mm.
You know, companies are used to having things like Employee Appreciation Day, or you might want to do something around your Inclusion Day, or Inclusion Week, or Inclusion Month.
I
Is
love that.
come up with different types, and we're virtual, and this really makes it such that is even when you talked about earlier around COVID and people are already feeling around isolation and so forth, you can do some fun virtual things. It's like Zoom karaoke challenges. or having even providing, we're used to doing meals and things like that for employees. What about giving them DoorDash certificates
Oh, yeah.
so they can do that? I know one company that actually is offering dinner for the family, actually on the weekly, in terms of they can expense that. Again, depending on the type of resources that you have, and even if it's a one-time deal in terms of saying, you can go ahead and take your family out for dinner and give us that expense report. Boy, how does that make people feel? They feel appreciated, they feel valued.
Yeah, I love that. Like, what are the things that you can do to create that unity? And I
Yes.
do like, whether virtual or those essential workers that are, how can you do something that drives community? and
Yes,
unity. And I'm wondering, Texanna, it might also be a time to prepare your ERG leaders.
absolutely.
Because I think that this is a really good time for those communities within your larger employee community to be able to rely on one another and have community as well.
This
So
is Mhm.
having conversation with them about what are we going to do post-election? What's the plan for the group?
That is absolutely wonderful. You absolutely want to engage your ERGs because they're going to come up with some great ideas.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great ideas, in addition to the fact of here, a lot of these situations, such as what we're talking about with the election, is impacts certain affinity areas or groups differently. You talked about with COVID, and we think about our Asian employees in
And
reference to
and
xenophobia
people with disabilities.
and with people with
Those,
disabilities. And then when you think about in terms of what we just talked about around the white supremacy and other underrepresented groups and how they're impacted, and also particularly around Black unrest and what we're seeing in terms of all the racial injustices, each one of those ERGs can be able to look through that lens
yep.
and to be able to communicate and also better serve in terms of what would be most impactful for their particular community or ERG. And so this is where engaging those ERGs are absolutely essential in terms of being able to really have a positive impact.
Boy, Texanna, we have gone through a lot. I mean, everything from think about your
Yeah.
core, anchoring back to your core values,
Mhm.
time off, engaging ERGs, volunteerism, and getting people to the polls. Like I've even I've even forgotten everything we covered.
Mhm.
Do you have a last truth bomb for me?
Yes, I would say is that I don't think there's been any time in history for the US like a time that we're going through right now. It is really a layering of crises from COVID to the economic disparities and issues that we've gone through racial injustice, and also the wildfires, the different floods, hurricanes, all these environmental impacts that have just really affected all of us, in addition to what we're experiencing now, that what could be a political crisis in terms of with the election. So, but I'm optimistic.
Well,
I'm very optimistic is that we can get through this. We can do this and we can be successful if we meet on common ground, despite the differences. Doesn't matter who you worked for, doesn't matter what all your beliefs are. We do have some common values, as I mentioned, where the land is not on your personal values when talking with others, but more on those company or organizational stated values that you've already agreed to, and being able to really focus on those. Then as well is really lift each other's up.
yeah.
Look at how you don't, you know, some of us are in situations in which we impact the enterprise or a department or a team. But I would also invite you to even do it down to the individual level. And that is to really role model, showing care, showing kindness, treating people with dignity and respect, and being able to look for those opportunities, again, to be proactive, to add fun into the game. Even with this chaos and craziness, guess what? We can fit in fun. And so that's what I would want to go ahead and leave in terms of the truth bomb, is that it is dire times, but we can get through this.
We will get through this.
Mhm.
We will get through this.
Yes.
So, Texanna, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be a really rich conversation, and I hope that all of you watching have taken 1, 2, 3, 4 things that can have such a profound impact on right now and through the course of this election and the weeks after. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody, get out there and do the next
Vote,
right
vote,
thing and vote, vote,
vote.
vote. See you next time.
Okay.